The air in Notting Hill carried a hint of spring, soft and floral, yet I felt none of its warmth. Our Georgian townhouse stood proud among the others, yet lately, it didn't feel like home. I, Diana Whitmore, had been married to Adrian for 7 years. A partnership once blooming with trust and shared dreams, now thinned out like an old photograph left in the sun. It all began with a party, one of those grand diplomatic affairs Adrian's office liked to throw. He was a senior attaché in the Foreign Service, and these events were everything to his career. I'd always attended by his side, dressed in muted elegance, smiling through the politics of it all. But this time, there was no invitation for me. At first, I assumed it was a mix-up. A forgotten RSVP, perhaps. But when I asked Adrian, his reply chilled me. They're keeping it small this year. Only staff and international delegates. Not even spouses. I tried to believe him. Truly, I did. But a hollow feeling nestled in my chest. Adrian had become distant lately. He took late calls in hushed tones, left early with hurried kisses, and had stopped asking about my art exhibitions altogether. I'd noticed a floral scent on his scarf that wasn't mine. Once or twice, I'd spotted unfamiliar lipstick smudges on his coffee mug, barely visible, but unmistakable. Still, I kept quiet. I wasn't the type to accuse without proof. A week before the party, I received a call from Eleanor, Adrian's colleague's wife. She asked whether I was going to wear the navy dress I had worn at last year's gala. I wasn't invited, I told her. Silence. Then a soft, confused chuckle. Oh. I assumed you'd be there. Adrian's name's on the main host list. My heart dropped. That night, I confronted Adrian again. His response was sharper, more defensive. Do you not trust me anymore? Are we really going to argue over a party? His eyes held challenge, not affection. I didn't reply. I just nodded, letting him believe I'd dropped it. But something inside me stirred. A quiet resolve. If he wouldn't take me, I'd find out why. I rang up an old friend, Amelia, who worked for a luxury event staffing agency. She had access to guest lists and knew how these events worked. Within minutes, she called me back. You're not on the list, Diana, she said. But Adrian is. And he's bringing someone. Her name's Scarlett Langdon. Scarlett Langdon. I didn't know the name, but I'd recognized the look in his eyes lately, the way he'd smiled when texting, or the casual lies, told too fluently. That evening, I sat alone in the lounge, glass of wine untouched, staring at our wedding photo on the mantel. His hand resting on mine. Smiles so believable then. I wouldn't beg to be included. But I also wouldn't be fooled. The night of the party was coming, and I had a plan. The night of the party arrived with a crisp chill, the kind that settled into your bones no matter how many layers you wore. From the drawing room window, I watched Adrian step into the waiting car, tailored in his navy tuxedo, hair slicked back just so. He didn't glance up. He didn't need to. He thought I was none the wiser. I waited a few moments after the car drove off, then stepped into my own evening dress, black silk, clean lines, no embellishments. I wasn't there to dazzle. I was there to see. Amelia had done more than check the guest list, she'd secured me a waitstaff pass through her agency. With my hair tied up and a silver tray in hand, I'd be just another face at the event. Invisible. Perfect. The ballroom at the Royal Crescent Hotel was already brimming with chatter and champagne when I slipped inside. Glittering chandeliers bathed the room in gold, and beneath them, Notting Hill's elite mingled as if nothing rotten could ever touch their lives. It didn't take long to spot him. Adrian stood near the grand piano, glass in hand, laughing a little too freely. And beside him stood a woman I didn't recognize, but instinct told me everything I needed to know. She wore red. The kind of red that demanded attention. hair the color of honey twisted into a delicate chignon. She rested her hand on his arm like it had always belonged there. He leaned into her slightly, too close, too familiar. Scarlett Langdon. I weaved through the crowd slowly, careful not to be seen. Each step closer brought new details. Her laughter, high and sweet. The way Adrian looked at her, not with guilt or caution, but comfort. Like a man who had done this before. I paused near a group of foreign dignitaries, offering flutes of champagne. I could hear their voices, but my focus stayed locked on him. Then it happened. A journalist, one I recognized from the Times, approached the couple. She raised her camera. "Ambassador Whitmore, mind if I get a photo of you and your lovely wife?" My heart stopped. Adrian didn't correct her. He didn't even blink. He slipped his arm around Scarlett's waist, smiled for the lens, and said, "Of course." I nearly dropped the tray. Wife. He had introduced her, allowed her, to be seen publicly as his wife. My hands trembled, but I steadied the glasses, forced a breath. My world didn't spin. It narrowed. Crystallized. Every feeling I had, shock, betrayal, heartbreak, folded into one quiet thought. This wasn't just an affair. It was a replacement. I didn't stay much longer. I slipped away before anyone could see through the costume. On the way home, I barely felt the cold, only the ache in my chest and the fire building beneath it. When Adrian returned home that night, he found me curled on the sofa with a book I hadn't read in days. "You're still up?" he asked, loosening his tie. I looked at him calmly. "How was the party?" He shrugged. "Boring. Same as always." I nodded and turned a page. I didn't need to shout. I didn't need to confront him, not yet. Because now, I had more than suspicion. I had seen the lie unfold in front of me, dressed in red and wearing my title. In the days that followed, Adrian returned to routine, slipping into his usual rhythm like nothing had happened. He left early, came home late, and offered me cold kisses on the cheek like I was an afterthought, not a wife. But I had changed. I began to notice the gaps. The little cracks in his stories. A diplomatic meeting that lasted too late, but no files in his briefcase. A forgotten dinner where he claimed to be held up at the embassy, yet came home freshly shaven, not a crease on his shirt. Then there were the silences. Longer than they used to be. Awkward. Forced. He no longer asked about my day or told me about his. We were strangers under the same roof. Emilia became my shadow. She helped me check his calendar, trace his calls, observe his lies. It was she who found the receipt in the coat pocket, dinner for two at a boutique hotel in Bath. Not a work trip. Not even a known embassy partner location. Just romantic. That night, I stared at the receipt for a long while, its corners soft from being folded, its ink smudged from Adrian's careless hands. I should have been furious. I should have screamed, torn the house apart. But all I felt was something colder. Resolve. If he wanted a new life, he could have had the decency to end the old one. But instead, he paraded her through parties, painted me invisible, and turned our home into a gallery of lies. I needed to be smart. Not vengeful. I had seen too many women burn themselves with the fire meant for their husbands. I wouldn't make that mistake. So I played my role. The quiet wife. The one who smiled at events, poured him coffee, kissed him goodbye. But every move I made had purpose. Every word, every silence, chess pieces on a board he didn't even know existed. One evening, Adrian left his phone unlocked on the kitchen island, distracted by a call on the landline. My hands shook as I picked it up, but I kept my breath steady. Messages. Photos. Voice notes. Most of it deleted, of course. But not the calendar. A weekend blocked out, Cotswolds, With S. No details. No initials. Just the letter S. Scarlett. It was 3 days from now. 3 days for him to sneak away under the guise of a government summit. 3 days for me to prepare. I closed the phone quietly and placed it exactly where he had left it. When he returned from the call, he gave me a fleeting smile. Sorry, love. Late again tomorrow. I nodded. It's fine. I've got a bit of a spa day with Emilia. He kissed my forehead absent-mindedly. Good. You deserve it. I watched him walk out of the kitchen. He had no idea. 3 days. That's all I needed. The Friday morning sun filtered through the tall windows of our Kensington townhouse. Adrian packed his weekend bag with the efficiency of a man used to secrecy. His passport, cufflinks, and cologne, all neatly tucked beside an envelope marked with the initials SL. He didn't notice me watching him from the hallway mirror. I wore my calm-like armor. He kissed me goodbye, murmured something about Brussels, then walked out the door with barely a glance. The engine of the cab faded into the distance, and I stood in the stillness, the clock ticking above the fireplace. Time to begin. While Adrian thought he was heading into a romantic escape, I was heading into revelation. Emilia waited outside, her car ready. In the boot, a discreet camera, a weekend bag, and a document folder I had been building quietly for months, photos, statements, bank slips, all pointing to one truth. Adrian had built a second life. Now, I would bring it into the light. We didn't follow him directly. That would be too obvious. Instead, we arrived in the Cotswolds that evening and checked into a cottage 2 roads behind the very hotel where Adrian had made his reservation. It was a picturesque place. Honeystone walls, ivy crawling up the sides, and quaint lanterns flickering by the doorways. Romantic, indeed. I watched from the car as Adrian arrived just after sunset. He stepped out, dressed not for a summit, but for seduction, tailored shirt, no tie, sleeves rolled. A woman followed. Scarlet dress. Blonde curls. Laughing. Scarlet. The receptionist welcomed them like they were regulars. My hands curled into fists, but I didn't move. I had what I needed. That night, I couldn't sleep. The bed was too soft, the silence too heavy. Emilia lay across the room, headphones in, her laptop open to a timeline she had built, tracking every lie, every excuse, every false embassy trip. The pieces fit too well. And yet, something didn't. Scarlett was too polished. Too confident. This wasn't an affair, it was a partnership. She didn't look like a mistress sneaking stolen time. She looked like someone who had a plan. At breakfast the next morning, I saw it. Scarlett kissed Adrian's cheek, slid her phone to him discreetly, and whispered something. His face hardened. He nodded once. Whatever this was, it went beyond desire. I needed to know more. That afternoon, I slipped into the hotel spa lobby and left behind a packet addressed to room 214. Inside was a forged invitation, an anonymous note, inviting Adrian to a private celebration that evening in the hotel's garden lounge. What he didn't know was that I would be watching. And waiting. As the sun dipped behind the Cotswold Hills, the lights of the lounge came alive. Emilia adjusted the camera from our vantage point, hidden behind a low hedge. At precisely 7, Adrian walked into the lounge. Alone. But not for long. Scarlett followed a few minutes later, no longer laughing. She was carrying a file. My breath caught. Whatever was in that file had nothing to do with romance. Adrian's eyes widened. He stood, his voice raised just enough for the microphone to pick up. You said this would stay private. Scarlett's voice, calm but sharp, it stays private if you keep your end. Otherwise, I press send. My heart slammed against my ribs. This wasn't an affair. It was blackmail. The lounge grew tense, the air thick with unspoken threats. Adrian sat down slowly, his jaw tight, his hand trembling slightly as he reached for his glass. Scarlett didn't blink. She placed the file on the table and leaned back, one leg crossed elegantly over the other, as if she'd done this 100 times before. I watched from behind the hedge, Emilia beside me with the camera trained on their faces. I had expected to see shame or guilt, maybe even panic, but Adrian looked furious, cornered. And that meant there was more than just an affair at stake. Scarlett spoke again, this time louder. You promised full support, Adrian. I held up my end. You promised me protection. Adrian's voice was low but sharp. You said no one would find out. You said she'd never know. She. That was me. Scarlett raised an eyebrow. And yet here we are. I caught my breath. This wasn't some lover's quarrel. This was business, dirty business. I recognized some of the documents she flipped through, shell companies, offshore accounts. He hadn't just been betraying me. He'd been laundering money under both our names. My name. A name I had spent years building with integrity. My hands shook. I hadn't come here just to catch a cheating husband. I had walked into a scheme that could ruin everything I had ever built. Suddenly, Adrian stood, towering over Scarlett. His voice rose. You recorded me. You've got copies of everything, don't you? Scarlett didn't flinch. Of course I do. I don't deal with amateurs. Adrian looked around nervously, lowering his voice. You want money? Fine. But this ends here. Tonight. Scarlett smiled like a cat who'd cornered a bird. I'm not after money anymore. I want the launch shares. You hand them over, and this stays between us. Launch shares. I blinked. Adrian had always downplayed his involvement in my upcoming expansion, a new branch of our design firm set to launch in Scotland. I'd handled all the paperwork, but he had insisted on being included, claiming he only wanted to support me. Support me, by selling my work. The final puzzle piece fell into place. He wasn't just having an affair. He was using me. And Scarlett was his accomplice. Or perhaps something worse, his enforcer. Emilia whispered, "We've got enough." But I shook my head. Not yet. I needed Adrian to say it. On tape. No more games, no more ambiguity. So I did something reckless. I stepped out from behind the hedge. Scarlett saw me first. Her smile faltered. Adrian turned. His face drained of color. Diana, he croaked. I didn't speak. I walked slowly towards the table, heels clicking softly on the stone. I pulled out a chair and sat down. Let's skip the introductions, I said. We all know each other far too well now. Scarlett glanced between us, uncertain for the first time. Adrian tried to recover. This isn't what it looks like. I laughed quietly. Then explain it to me, Adrian. I'd love to hear what exactly this is. He looked at the file. Then at me. Then at Scarlett. And then, he ran. He actually ran. Scarlett cursed under her breath and stood to follow, but I reached into my bag and pulled out my own file. Don't bother, I said calmly. I've already made arrangements. Scarlett froze. I know about the Cayman account, I added. And the Zurich transfer. You weren't the only one keeping receipts. Scarlett stared at me, then sat back down. I underestimated you. I leaned in. Most people do. The evening had descended into a thick, oppressive silence. Scarlett's attempts to regain control were futile, her confidence waning as she realized there was no escape from the trap she had walked into. I leaned back in my chair, waiting for her to speak, knowing there was still one more card I needed to play. Adrian had vanished, and Scarlett was left with only her words, but not for long. I wasn't about to let her waltz out of this with some easy compromise. There was a war on the horizon, and this time, I wasn't the one standing in the corner, watching. She sighed deeply, running a hand through her dark hair. You don't know what you've gotten yourself into, Diana. This isn't just about money. It's power, it's everything. You'll never win. Her words felt like a distant echo. I was already too far gone to care. I didn't need her warnings, or her threats. I needed action. What she didn't realize was that she'd just made a fatal mistake. You're right about one thing, I said quietly, breaking the silence. This is about power. But it's my power now. You just handed it to me on a silver platter. Scarlett stood abruptly, knocking her chair back, her hands clenched into fists. You're not going to get away with this. I watched her with cold, calculated eyes. No, Scarlett. You're the one who won't get away with this. I've already taken the first step. She faltered for a moment, confusion flickering across her face. What the hell are you talking about? I didn't smile. I simply held up a flash drive, the one with the incriminating documents. I've already sent these to a very interested party. You have until midnight tonight to make things right, or I'm letting the world know exactly who's been pulling the strings behind the scenes. Her eyes widened in horror. You wouldn't. I tilted my head slightly. Don't test me. You've made a habit of pushing people too far. But I'm not like them. For the first time that evening, Scarlett seemed genuinely afraid. She backed away slowly, her mind racing, her mouth dry. You don't know what you're doing. You think you're the only one with leverage. I leaned forward, the smirk I'd been holding back finally breaking through. No, Scarlett. I know exactly what I'm doing. You won't get away with this. And neither will he. She hesitated, her confidence slipping away, her face pale. The empire she had tried to build on lies was crumbling, piece by piece, under the weight of the truth. I stood, feeling the sharp edge of satisfaction cut through me. Now, you have a choice. You can either walk out of here, try to salvage what's left of your life, or you can take your chances with me, and the truth. She didn't respond. There was nothing left to say. I turned and walked out of the garden, my head held high. I didn't know what tomorrow would bring. I didn't know what kind of hell Scarlett would unleash in her desperation. But for the first time in years, I felt in control. And I would make sure that nothing and no one would ever take that away from me again. The days following Scarlett's retreat were tense, but nothing could have prepared me for the storm that was about to hit. Word had spread fast, and as much as Scarlett tried to salvage her empire, the cracks were becoming impossible to ignore. The fear in her eyes the night we faced off was still fresh in my mind, and I knew she wouldn't go down quietly. I found myself sitting in the same office I had spent countless hours in, the weight of everything suddenly feeling so much heavier. There were moments when I doubted my choices, when the enormity of what I was about to do hit me all at once. But in the end, I knew there was no turning back. The knock on the door was sharp and unexpected, breaking my train of thought. I didn't have to ask who it was. It was Adrian. His presence was unmistakable, even though we'd barely spoken since that fateful night. Diana, he said, his voice low, as he stepped into the room. We need to talk. I looked up from my desk, meeting his gaze. About what? Everything has already been set in motion. Adrian took a deep breath, his face tense. I know what you're planning. And I'm not sure it's the right move. You don't understand the consequences of this. It's bigger than just her. His words hung in the air, and I felt my pulse quicken. What do you mean, bigger than her? He stepped closer, lowering his voice even more. There are people who don't want this getting out. People who won't let it go without making sure you never see the light of day again. I stared at him, the realization slowly sinking in. This wasn't just about Scarlett. There were others, powerful figures in the background, pulling strings. The game had changed. And now, it was more dangerous than ever. I've already come this far, I replied, my voice steady. And I'm not stopping now. If I back down, they'll come for me, and everyone I care about. Adrian's face softened, but only slightly. I know you're strong, Diana. But this is different. You have no idea what you're up against. I stood, finally meeting him at eye level. I know exactly what I'm up against. And I'm ready for it. There was a moment of silence between us, the air thick with the tension of the unspoken. Then Adrian nodded, the weight of the situation finally sinking in. Just be careful, he muttered, turning to leave. You're playing with fire. But I was already past the point of no return. The decision had been made, and the pieces were already in motion. As Adrian walked out, I sat back down, my mind racing with the possibilities. The storm was coming, and there was no way I could stop it now. The day of reckoning had arrived. There was no turning back now. The final pieces of the puzzle had been set in place, and I could feel the weight of everything crashing down around me. The danger was no longer a distant possibility, it was real, palpable, and closing in fast. As I made my way to the meeting that would determine the fate of it all, I couldn't help but feel the rush of adrenaline coursing through my veins. Every step felt heavier, every breath more deliberate. I knew what was at stake, my reputation, my empire, and my future. But more than that, I knew this was the moment that would define me. The meeting was set to take place at one of the most prestigious boardrooms in the city, a place where power and influence ruled. As I stepped into the room, I could feel the eyes of the board members on me, their scrutiny sharp and unyielding. It wasn't just about business anymore, it was about survival. Diana, one of the older board members said, his voice cold as he motioned for me to take a seat. We've been waiting for you. I nodded, my heart pounding in my chest. This was it. The moment I'd been preparing for, the moment that would either break me or make me. I trust you've all had time to review the documents, I said, my voice steady despite the storm raging inside me. If you've done so, you'll know that Scarlett's empire is crumbling. She's tried to play the game, but she's out of moves. There was a murmur of agreement around the table, but I could see the hesitation in their eyes. They weren't convinced. Not yet. But what you don't know, I continued, my tone growing sharper, is that this is more than just a business deal. It's about power. It's about control. And it's about who's willing to go the furthest to claim it. The room fell silent. I could feel the tension building, the weight of the words I had just spoken hanging in the air. Scarlett may have played dirty, I said, my gaze locking with each of them, but she's not the only one who knows how to fight. I'm not just here to win a business deal, I'm here to take what's mine. And I won't stop until I do. The board members exchanged uneasy glances, but I could see something shifting in their expressions. The fear was setting in, and it was exactly what I wanted. But just as I thought I had them in my grasp, the door to the boardroom swung open. The figure who entered was the last person I expected to see. It was Scarlett. Her eyes locked with mine, filled with defiance and a steely determination I hadn't expected. She had come to the table, and she wasn't going down without a fight. You think you can just take what's mine, Diana? Scarlett's voice was laced with venom as she stepped further into the room. You think you've won? You haven't seen anything yet. I stood my ground, my heart racing. This was it, the final showdown. No more games. No more waiting. The battle for everything had begun.